Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today, inshallah, we're going to have our first session about objects and classes, which is a new topic for this semester. And let's start. So far we were creating classes, and you can name it anything like exercise 1, like recursion, like anything, and we were implementing all our methods inside this class. Today, what we would like to do is we would like to create and define an object. And this object can be of any type. You can describe the table, you can describe a computer, you can describe a pen, and all these are, at the end, they are objects that you would like to describe. So let's start step by step to do this. Now, once we'd like to create an object, we create a class for this object, and now our class should be named by the object that you want to create. So we are going to explain the exercise, the first exercise in practice assignment 7, which is to describe an airplane. So the question says an airplane model can be described, and it's highly oversimplified, by the following attributes: name, empty weight, number of seats, and fuel consumption. So at the beginning, we are going to describe an airplane, so our class should be named as airplane. It's not exercise 1 nor anything else. It is an airplane because we are now describing an airplane. So we have an airplane, and as we can see, it automatically created public class airplane. Okay, and then we would like to describe this airplane, and the question says that we can describe it using the following attributes, which are the name, empty weight, seats, and fuel consumption. The attributes or the variables that are used to describe an object, any object, we call them instance variables. Instance variables means that they are variables that relate to an object, and they describe it or they define this object. So far we have string name. However, do we know the name for the airplane so far? We don't. So we just say string name. The same goes for number of seats. We say int seats. We don't know so far how many seats the airplane has. And we say, for example, double fuel consumption. And we say double, the other one was empty weight. Okay? And that's it. As if we are just declaring the variables. We don't initialize them here because you don't know what is the name of an airplane and the number of seats, the fuel consumption, and the empty weight. And because you want to have the name variable different for each airplane that you want to create. So you just say, define your attributes, and then just keep them now for, like this for now. Okay, and then we would like to implement something that creates the airplane for us. Something that creates or constructs an airplane, we call it a constructor. Okay? Okay. What is a constructor and how does it look like? We say public, and then you would like to create an airplane. So you say airplane. It's the same name of the class. Okay, which is an airplane. And then to create an airplane, you need to have, for each airplane, you need to have a name, seats, fuel consumption, and empty weight that user will give you in order to create this airplane. So you need to have parameters for this constructor to be 4 parameters, and they should have a name, for example, string n, and int s for seats, and double, for example, f for fuel consumption, and double EW for empty weight. Okay? You might think it's a method. It looks like a method. However, it's not a method. Public airplane, it's just a constructor. How can you differentiate it between a method and a constructor? As you see, there is no return type. There is no int, double, string. There is no return type. Just public, and then the same name as the class name. Okay, and then what we'd like to do is we want to initialize our instance variables and give them values that you pass in the parameters, from the parameters. Okay, then what we'd like to do is, we'd like to say name is equal to n, not vice versa, not n equal to name. This is wrong. Why? Why is it wrong? That one is right. Why is this one wrong? Because name does not have a value yet. However, n has the value. So we put the value of n in the name. Okay? So we remove this. And then you do the same for the other variables. So you say seats is equal to S. And we say fuel consumption is equal to fuel. And we say empty weight is equal to EW. Okay? What if we would like to have not N and S and fuel and F and EW? What if we would like to have it as name, S as name, seats, fuel con, and empty weight? We'll see it later, but not now. Okay, and then this is our constructor that initializes our instance variables with values coming from the constructor. Okay, and then we can now just test our class and start creating an airplane object. So how or where we will do it? We'll do it in the main method. So we say public static void main string args. And now we would like to create an airplane object. By the way, you have seen an object before. However, we didn't tell you that this is an object. And if you recall the scanner class, if you want to get an input from the user, we use the scanner, right? Do you remember? The scanner is a class, and we create from it an object that we can use in our classes to get an input from the user. So the same way you create a scanner, it's the same way you create an airplane. So before we said scanner, for example, S equal new scanner something. Here we will say we would like to create an object of type airplane. So you will say airplane, A for example, A1 equal. You are going to create a new object. Like we said, new scanner, so you're going to say new, and it's a preserved word, it turns into blue. However, you are not going to say new scanner. You are now want to create an airplane, so you will say new airplane. Okay? And then to create an airplane, by our definition, we need to have 4 variables, which are the name, the seats, fuel consumption, and the empty weight. So these inputs, I should pass these inputs to the airplane. Okay, where can I pass these inputs? Here. In the scanner, you pass something which is called system.in. Now we will pass our variables that we need, which are the name, seats, fuel consumption, and empty weight. And you will pass them at the same, with the same order that they appear in the constructor. So we have name and then seats and the others. So we will say, for example, I can say, for example, A1, or let's say GUC. We have an airplane called GUC. It's its name. Okay, number of seats, for example, it can be 400. Fuel consumption, it can be 450. Of course, it's double. However, it will be stored as 450.0. We don't need to write 0.0. And empty weight, for example, 300. Okay? What happens from this line? From this line, we are going to create an object of type airplane. This object, you called it A1, and we say new airplane something. This part, it calls the constructor, and it passes the inputs that you passed in the brackets, it passes it to the constructor, and now we're going to have here the GUC, and here is 400, and this is 450, and this is 300. And now we're going to initialize our name instance variable with GUC, and the seats with 400, fuel consumption with 450, empty weight with 300. Okay? Good. Now what I can do is, we can create also another airplane. I can take this copy and paste. And I can call it, for example, A2. Okay? And now I would like to call the airplane, for example, AUC. And the number of seats is 200. Fuel consumption 500. And empty weight 600, anything. Okay? Now we would like to see, let's move this. If we can compile correctly, if we compile, it compiles correctly. However, if you run, nothing will happen. Why? Because there is nothing to be shown. Like we can run, nothing happens because you don't print anything. So what we can do is, now I have two objects, A1 and A2. Both are of type airplane. Airplane is our class, and A1, A2 are the objects created from this class. Okay, now each airplane, A1 and A2, each one of them has a different name, empty weight, seats, and fuel consumption. And what about if we'd like to, for example, print or show the name of an airplane? So what we can do is something like this. I will say system.out.println, and then what I would like to do is I would like to print the name of an airplane. Okay, how can I access the name of the airplane? You will see what is the instance variable that you used that stores the name of an airplane. The name of an airplane is stored in a variable which is called name, not n. Why is that? Because n has a scope only in this constructor, which means I can't use n out anywhere after the constructor because it's not seen. It's seen only in this constructor. So, however, I can access the name because it's an instance variable. So what we'd like to say is print name. Okay, if we're going to compile, you get an error. Why? You say that the name, I don't see the name. The name of what? The name is an instance variable. It's not seen in the main method. It's seen in an object, which means, do you want to get the name? You want to get the name of which object? A1 or A2 or A3 or of which object? You need to say explicitly which object you want to get its name, even if I don't have A2. Again, the name is an instance variable, which means it needs an object to be printed. Which object? Anyone that you want. We can say, for example, A1. Okay, how can I say go to A1 and get me its name? We say A1.name. This means go to A1 and give me the name of A1. And I'm pretty sure that A1 has a name variable because airplane class has instance variable which is called name. So any airplane that I will create, for sure, it has a name variable. So we can now compile. It compiles correctly, and if we run, we have the output of the GUC. Why? Because A1 has the name GUC, as we can see from the constructor. Okay, what if I want to print the number of seats of A2? So I can say system.out.println, and then the number of seats. The seats here, it's an instance variable, which means it needs an object to be accessed. Okay, which object do you want to have? Anyone, you can choose anyone. I can say, for example, A2. I can say A2 and then go to A2 and then access from A2 the number of seats which is stored in a seats variable. So if you compile and if you run, we get the 200, which is the number of seats for A2. Okay? Okay. However, we can have another thing that gets me the name, the seats, and everything related to the airplane object instead of accessing the variables by myself. How can I do this? We can do this using methods. As we said before, methods are used to do some operation. One of these operations is to return the name or return the seats of a certain object. Okay. If we'd like to implement a method that gives me the name or the seats or the fuel consumption or whatever instance variable that we have, we say public, and then forget the word static so far. We'll explain it next time. However, we will not write static. And then you write the return type. Now, if I want to return a name, the name has a data type string. So the return type here is string. And for example, I can give it a name of the method, for example, getName. Okay? Okay. And then what you were going to do is, this is a method that returns something, right? So I should see here the keyword return. Okay. Return what? Return the instance variable that is used to store the name, which is, in our example, it's called name. So I would just say return name. Okay. This name relates to which object? Is it A1? Is it A2? Is it A3? Is it which object? It's any object that you will call the method on. So if I want to say print A1 and get me the name of A1, instead of saying A1.name, I will just say A1 dot. Now I will not call the instance variable. However, I will call the method that gets me the name, which is called getName. And it doesn't take any input. Why is that? Now, if I'm telling you, get me the name, of course you will tell me name of which object. So you need from me an input, which is an object, which is, for example, A1. However, A1 is already there because you invoke or you call the method on it. So you have A1 now. So you will not pass the A1 as an input. You can, however, we won't do it this time. We do it inshallah next time. However, for now, you have the object which is called A1 as an input for you. Okay? So I can do another one with A2. I will say A2 dot, instead of name, I will say A2 dot get name, and I will remove this and this, and let's compile. Okay, it compiles, and if we run, we have the output GUC from the first print statement and AUC from the second print statement. And if you think about it, it's the same like if you print A1.name, as if you are calling the instance variable. It's the same. However, sometimes you don't know the instance variable, how is it named. For example, assume that it is hidden. Assume that you don't know how did the developer name the instance variable. What we do is, any developer for sure will give you an access to the name of the method. However, they will not give you an access to know the name of your instance methods, of the instance methods they used. So it's more efficient to use a method that returns the instance variables that you need. And I can have the same method for the other instance variables. Of course, we will just change the return type and the name of the methods. So this is a method to get the name, and if I want to get the number of seats, so I will return int, and we will say get seats, and now I will return the seats. Okay, and I can do the same for the fuel consumption. So I will say get FC, and I will return the instance variable, which is called fuelcon, and double get EW, get empty weight, and I will return the empty weight. Okay? Okay. Again, if, for example, I want to call get seats, it will return seats. Seats of which object? It's of the object that you are going to call the method on. So if I want to call, for example, okay, let's leave it and just change it. If I want to call get seats, you need to give me which airplane you want to get the seats of. I will say, for example, get seats of A2. Okay, and then you will say seats, get seats, the name of this method. Now, what happens is you have this print statement. You will find get seats. We will go to get seats and return seats. I will return the seats of which object? A2, A1, A3. You will return the seats of A2. Why A2? Because you called get seats on A2. So you will just see that we are going to print, for example, the 200 as an output because you called get seats on A2, which has a seats of 200 seats. Okay? Okay. This is to get a value of any instance variable. What if I want to change or update any value of the instance variables also through a method? You can do this. For example, I want to say, I want to change the name of airplane 2 to be BUE. Okay? How can I do this? You can do this through a method. Okay, let's see it. We'll say public. You're going to change. I didn't tell you to return anything, so it's void. And then, for example, we can call it set name. Okay, and then do I need inputs? Let's think of it. If I'm telling you change the name, you will tell me, okay, I will change the name of which object and what is the new name. Okay, which object we can get it like this. We are just calling the method on the object, so you don't need the object as an input. However, you still need the new name. So here the input should be a string. Why string? Because the name is stored for you as a string variable. So you will say name, for example, new name. And then what you are going to do is just to reset or change the instance variable with the new name. So you're going just to say name equal new name. What is this name? This name is the instance variable that stores the name. Okay? So we can try it here. I can leave the print statement for a1.getName. It should get me GUC. And then I want to say, okay, apply the change and call the method which is called setName to set the name of A1, the GUC, to be BUE. So I can say A1 dot, and then you will call the method which is called setName, and you give it as input the new name, which is BUE. And it's a void method, so it doesn't return anything. You just call it on its own. And then if you want to see the changes, you need to print a1.getName once more to see if it's changed. So here we say a1.getName. Let's compile. It compiles, and if we run, we have two outputs. The first output is GUC, which is the value that is printed before we change the name. And then you get BUE, which is the new name that you gave for A1 to be BUE. Okay? Okay. Now, what if I want to print A1? For example, I don't want now to say this. I just want to print A1. What do you think, or what do you need A1 this line which prints A1 to give you as an output. If you compile, it compiles, and if we run, if you expect that it will give you GUC 400, 450, and 300, unfortunately, this will not be printed, and what's printed is another thing, which is new for you. However, if you see what's printed, we have something like airplane, which is the class name, and then the character at, and then this is a number. And if you see, you can see that there is a C character in this number. What is this? This is the memory address or the reference where this object, which is A1, is stored. And this number is a hexa number, hexadecimal number, because you can see a C. Okay, this means what? This means that if you want to print A1, you will not see the GUC 400, 450, and 300, which means you can't get a report about this object. Okay, what if I want to have a report that contains all the instance variables about an object? You can have more than one solution. The first solution is you print it manually, which means we can say A1 and then call the method that gets you the name. So I can say A1 dot get name, and then we'll concatenate, and for example, you can say just comma, and then I will call the method that gets me the seats, for example. So I will say A1 dot get seats plus, I will say comma, and then I will call get fuel consumption, get FC plus comma, and then I will call the empty weight, A1 dot get EW, and that's it. Now, if you compile, it compiles, and if we run, now you get the GUC 400, 450, and 300. However, this is tedious. It's not logic that I print all or call all the methods that I use just to print me the values. So what else you can do? What you can do is you have a method that does the job for you. So I can say public, and now this method will return you a string. This string contains these values. So its return type is string. Let's call it display report. And it doesn't take an input. And all what it does is it returns, and now you can give it this line. However, we should remove the A1 from it. It's okay, you can say this. You should remove the A1 because we don't have A1 here, and here remove A1, and here we remove A1. Okay? And now what we'd like to do is I want to display a report. Okay, of which object? Then now you will need to give me the object. So I will say, for example, A1. A1, now choose the method that gives you the report. It's called display report. So we'll say A1.display report, and it's a method, so you need to give it the brackets. However, it doesn't take an input, so it's only empty brackets. And now if you compile, it compiles, and if you run, you will get the report displayed, which is GUC 400, 450, and 300. Okay? Of course, this method, you can change it, and you can here, instead of returning get name, you can just say, get name, by the way, is the method that we defined here. It's this one. And get seats is also this method. You can leave it like this, or you can have something like return, and now you can access the instance variable by itself. So I can say return name, which is the instance variable, this one, and seats, and fuel con, and remove the brackets, and empty weight and remove the brackets. Both are the same. Okay? Just leave any one of them. Okay. However, if you are going to print A1 alone without calling any method, you will see that you will also have the reference printed, the memory address. Okay? Okay, then we can just not call it by this way. However, what if you would like to call A1, just A1, to print A1, and you get the same result of the report, which is GUC 400, 450, and 300. To do this, you need to know something. You need to know that there is a predefined method that you don't see, which is called toString. The toString method is implemented somewhere, and what it does is it gives you the reference of the object that you created. So for example, if I say A1 dot toString, and let's compile, it gives you the address, the memory reference. Okay, this means what? This means that you have two cases. If you are calling A1.toString, it gives you the memory address. If you are just calling A1, it also calls the toString method on this object, and in both cases, it will return you the instance, the memory reference. So, which means if you keep the toString or you remove it, in both cases, it will be called on the A or whatever object that you want to print. Okay, what if I want to change the definition of the toString method to be my definition that I want, in order that when I say just print A and remove the toString, it prints me the report. Then if you want to do this, then you want to have another copy of the toString method in your class. Okay? So if I want to do this, then I will say public. It has a fixed syntax that you should apply. It's public, and then you say string. It returns you a string, and it's called toString. The 2 is small, S capital, and then the remaining characters are small. It doesn't take any input. And then you can write in its body how do you want the report to be. So I can say, like the exact line in the display report. And now, if I want to say A1.toString, let's compile. It compiles, and if we run, now it gives you not the memory address. It gives you the report that you want. Why is that? Because now you have a toString method in your class. So it calls the toString method, which is in your class, and returns you the definition that you want. I can add here something for you to distinguish between both. Let's say in the toString method. Okay, let's compile. Now, what we are printing is A1.toString. We have in the toString, and then you have the GUC 400, 450, and 300. What if you print the A1.display report? I will go in the display report, and I will add something. I will say in the display report. Okay, let's compile, run. Now you will see that you have two print statements. Why is that? Because I had two print statements, one for the display, one for the toString. And you will have the first one in the display report, and then you will have GUC 400, 450, 300, and the other one in the toString, GUC 400, 450, and 300. It's the same thing. Why is that? Because I copied and pasted this line in both methods. Now, the difference is I can now remove the toString call from A1 in the print statement, and you will see that you get the same result. So I will say in the display report, GUC and the remaining values, and in the toString, also with the remaining values, and if you see in the print statement, I didn't call the toString. However, it's automatically called by definition. By convention, this is what happens. Okay, so at the end, we can say that if you have the A1.toString or just A1, in both cases, they will call the toString method. And if you have the toString method in your class, then it is the one that will be called by the definition that you have. If you don't have it, then they will call the toString method, which you do not see, which is the predefined one, and it returns you the memory address. Okay? So now we don't need the display report in anything, so I can just comment it, or I can leave it. It's okay. It doesn't differ. And now let's go to something that we left at the beginning. Now it is passed in the constructor, exactly the same as the name of the instance variables defined in the class. So I want to say name, and here seats, and here fuel consumption, and here empty weight. You can? Yes, you can. However, there will be a small problem. And here I say, of course, when you say this is name and this is name, so I can say name equal name, and then I will say seats equal seats, and fuel consumption equal fuel consumption, and empty weight equal to empty weight. However, let's think of it. This name belongs, or which one do you mean? Is it the parameter passed, or is it the instance variable? The same goes for the seats. The seats, is it the instance variable, or is it the parameter? And this seats, is it the instance variable, or is it the parameters? Now we can be somehow confused. And also Java will be confused. So what we say is, you need to distinguish between the instance variable and the parameter passed. To distinguish between this, you want to say that this name belongs to an object. However, I don't know so far what is the name of this object, right? No, we can say, or we can give this object a name, and we will name it this. So this is the name of an object which you want. So if I want to say the name of my object is called this. So you say this dot name is equal to name. From this part, the left-hand side, this one means that this name variable, it belongs or it relates to an object which is called this. So this means that this variable is the instance variable. It's not the parameter passed. Okay, and what about this? This is the parameter passed. Okay, and the same goes for the other instance variables, because all the left-hand side variables are the variables that belongs to an object, which is the instance variables. So you need to have this dot. So I will say this dot seats, and I will say this dot fuel consumption, and this dot empty weight equal the empty weight. Okay, good. If you compile. Okay, it compiles. No, because we didn't comment the display report. Okay, you can just comment this. If you compile, it compiles, and if you run, it gives you the same output. Okay? Okay. However, let's think of something. I needed to have this keyword in the constructor. Why? To distinguish between the instance variables and the parameter passed, because you named the parameters with the same name like the instance variables. We didn't need to have it before, like when we had only string n and s. Okay, the question is, do we need to have this dot in the remaining methods? Like do I need to have here this dot name and this one this dot name, you don't need to. Why? Because there is nothing to distinguish between. Here I have seats. This seats, I'm pretty sure it belongs to the object which I'm invoking the method on. So if you put this or you remove it, both are the same. Okay, so I will just keep this for the get name and get seats, and I will remove it from the fuel consumption and the get empty weight because you don't need it. You only need it only here to distinguish between the instance variables and the parameters passed. Okay? Okay, so also we can run, and it gives the same output. Okay? Now, assume that someone would like to create an airplane, and we will call it airplane 3. So I will say here, airplane A3 equal new airplane. And now I should give it the inputs that it needs. However, so far I don't have inputs, which means I'm not yet ready to have the name, nor the seats, fuel consumption, or the empty weight of my airplane. However, I want to create an airplane. Okay? If you want to do this, then you will not give me an input. Okay. This means that you want to have a constructor that does not take any parameters or any inputs. Do you have it so far? No, you don't have it. Which means that I need most probably to add a new constructor that doesn't take or does not accept or does not need any inputs from me to be able to create an airplane. Good. Then what we will have to do is something like public airplane, and then you will have the brackets. However, you want the brackets to be empty because you don't know, or you know that there will be no inputs. So you just leave the bracket. Okay, this means something. How many constructors do I have so far? So far, I have this one, which initializes the instance variable with the variables passed. And now I have another constructor that does not take any parameters or any input. However, it should do something. The question is, can I have two constructors for the same class? Yes, you can. Why is that? Because sometimes users have inputs to create the object and sometimes they don't. Or what I know is I want to create an airplane. However, I'm not yet sure what is the name of the airplane. So I want just to say create airplane, so I say new airplane with no parameters. Okay. However, you should do something in this constructor. Yes, it doesn't take any parameters, but what you can do is you can give me the default values for these instance variables written in the body of the constructor. So I can say, okay, if you don't know the name of the airplane, I will name it for you by default. For example, MIT. And if you don't know the seats, so for example, I will give you by default the seats 100. And I can give you the fuel consumption 200. And I will give you the empty weight 400. What are these? These are my values that I wanted to have by default for any user who couldn't have the name, seats, fuel consumption, and empty weight for the airplane that he wants to create. So if you are going now to call this and create a new airplane, it's okay. However, if you want to see the data stored in this A3, so I can say something like this, print A3, and let's see what happens. You see the first line, it's the print statement of the A1, which is the GUC airplane, this one. And the second print statement is the MIT 100, 200, 400. What are these values? These are the default values that were used or put in the parameterless constructor. This constructor, we call it parameterless less constructor. Why is that? Because it doesn't take any parameters. However, it gives the default values in the body. Of course, the default values can be the default really values, which I can give it just the empty string for the string, and 0 for this integer, and also 0 for the double, and 0 for the 400. It's just whatever value that you want to use. However, we just use the MIT and 100 and the other values to see the output. So if you compile again, and we see what happens, if you want to know what happens from this line, when we create the airplane, which is A1, you have here the call of airplane, which is the constructor, and here you give it 4 variables, 4 values. So this one means that we are going to call a constructor, which is called airplane. And now you can find 2 airplane constructors. Which one you will call? You will call the one that takes 4 values from you, which is the first constructor. And the same happens when we call the A2, we create the A2. And now when we create the A3, you say new airplane, which is the constructor call. And now we will find also 2 airplane constructors, but now I will go to the constructor that does not accept or that does not take any parameters from me, which is this one. And by default, it puts or initializes the instance variables with these values. If you later want to change any name, for example, by default, the A3 now has the value of MIT as the name. If you want to change this name, so I can say A3 dot, remember the method which we used, which is setName. I can say A3 dot setName, and then I can give it a new name. For example, I can give it Harvard. Okay, and if you want to see the output, I can print once more the A3. Of course, now the toString method is called, and let's run. So you have the GUC, which is okay, and now you have MIT, which comes from this statement before you reset the name to Harvard, and now you have the third print statement, which is Harvard 100, 200, 400, which comes from after setting the name to Harvard. Okay? I hope it was easy so far, and next time, inshallah, we'll continue on this objects and classes topic, and see you inshallah next time. Goodbye.